Well, folks, here again for the weekly forecast. During this past week, the two big items of concern were one, lack of precipitation. In fact, virtually no, if any, precipitation reported statewide or into the Central Plains. And two, the cold air that moved in late in the week. The models last week completely underplayed, brought some freezing temperatures to northern Nebraska, moderate freeze into central Nebraska, and extreme southern Nebraska had some patchy scattered frost. So we haven't had a killing freeze, at least in the southern half of the state, as defined by temperatures at least 28 or below, but we certainly had our first white covering of areas of the grass of the year, and there will be more to come. In fact, the models are advertising a hard freeze event before the month's end for all of the state, probably as we get into late next weekend. But in terms of precipitation, we sure could use some significant moisture across the Central Plains, not only in southern Nebraska, but all the way down into Texas and Oklahoma, where very dry conditions have been pretty much the norm over the last 30 to 45-day period. Now, there are increasing signs that the western United States is going to turn to an active stormy pattern, and that was advertised by the experimental two-week lead forecast that I showed you last week that indicated that wet trend developing in the central and southern plains. That's an extension of the troughs that are starting to build into the western United States. So if we can make it through the next few days, we have the possibility of an increasing moisture chances as we move into the later half of next week, and after that it looks like a very stormy pattern for much of the central and southern plains. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we have in store. The cold air that came into the region is now over the northeastern United States, as that northwest flow bringing out the cold air out of Canada remains pretty much over the northeast, and in its wake we have ridging building up into the central plains. And so we are going to see some very nice conditions today. Although a bit cool in the eastern part of the state, we will start to see some warming temperatures up into the 70s across the southwestern sections of the state. And as we go into tomorrow, that ridge will actually expand northward and eastward and bring very nice conditions for Sunday statewide. We'll be looking at low 80s easily in the southwest, with mid to upper 70s, pretty consistent across southeast and east central Nebraska, and probably upper 60s to low 70s across northeast Nebraska. I will draw your attention to this trough in the western United States, and depending on how this system moves out will determine whether or not we get precipitation, at least early next week. Right now the models are splitting that energy and leaving Nebraska kind of in between the systems, but if it comes out as one piece, we'd expect the precip to pick up in earnest as we get into Tuesday. So as we get into Monday, we're going to start to see some of that energy by the models depicted as breaking off into the northern plains, and a piece of that will move up into the panhandle, so we could see some precipitation breaking out, at least in the southern half of the panhandle late Monday night and carrying on into Tuesday morning, with some of that moving eastward, probably losing its strength the farther east it goes. Now as we go into Tuesday, we will see the energy moving up into the Dakotas, and the second piece of energy moving over into Texas, and that leaves most of Nebraska between these two systems. So although we'll see some cool temperatures, we're not expecting to see much in the way of significant moisture statewide. Now as we get into Wednesday, that system will start to move its way toward the Great Lakes, and we'll get a slight northwest flow across northeast Nebraska, but more importantly we'll start to see the ridging building back into the western part of the state. So we're going to rebound in temperatures slightly on Wednesday, but more importantly as we get into Thursday we're going to see some very warm conditions redevelop, and then we have this trough moving into the Pacific Northwest that will start to make its way into the central plains as we get into Friday, increasing our precipitation chances. So if we look at the temperature forecast, kind of a roller coaster, warm this weekend, cooling in with that front on Tuesday, and then we see a slight rebound before we cool down once again on Friday with the next system coming in. 8 to 14-day forecast keeps us in the above normal temperatures, and in terms of precipitation, we see pretty much the lower 48 with above normal moisture.